Good evening, everyone. My name's Tony Lehmann from Randwick Council. I'm the Manager of Integrated Transport. Thank you for joining us this evening. What we're doing tonight is talking about the Integrated Transport Strategy. And I just want to say welcome to all those who have joined us so far this evening. To begin with, I'd like to make an acknowledgement to country. I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the land of the Bidjigal and the Gadigal peoples. They are the traditional owners who for thousands of years occupied and cared for vast areas along the Sydney coast. On behalf of the participants of this meeting, I acknowledge and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and also to those Aboriginal people participating today. We have 4 panel members today. As I said, my name's Tony Lehmann. I'm the Manager of Integrated Transport, and I'll ask my fellow panellists to introduce themselves. Jane.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Jane Parker. I work in the Integrated Transport team at Council with Tony, looking after sustainable transport.
Peter.
Good evening. My name is Peter Maganov. I'm the Manager of Sustainability, and I'm here as there's some overlap between some of the issues in the environment strategy and the transport strategy.
And from the City of Sydney, we have Fiona Campbell. Fiona.
Hi, I'm Fiona Campbell. I'm coming to you from Gadigal land of the Eora people at the City of Sydney, and I'm the Manager of Cycling Strategy there.
Thank you to all of you. Those who are watching, please post who you are and where you're from. It's always good to know what our audience is. What I'd like to do is introduce the strategy. You can see it on our website. It looks like that. It is what's known as an informing strategy. So it's quite a lightweight document that sets the strategic direction for Council's transport considerations over the next 10 years. We recently released the draft document for public comment. The strategy focuses on 3 outcomes with 33 strategic approaches to help deliver these outcomes. Those 3 outcomes are a transport network where sustainable transport options are the preferred choice for people, a safe, efficient and sustainable road network that balances the needs of movement and place to ensure roads are used for their intended purpose, and a parking system that caters to the needs of residents, freight delivery, visitors and workers. As an opening question to all my panellists, I'm going to ask, tell me about a place where the transport system surprised you in some way. Peter.
I had the pleasure of going to some of the Scandinavian countries some years ago, and I was very impressed with their light rail version of public transport.
Okay. Fiona.
So my favourite place in the world is Utrecht in the Netherlands, and in the city centre, it's pretty well car free for a lot of it. And it's amazing to see that businesses are able to get deliveries with really large hand carts that are powered, which are carrying pallet loads of soft drinks or, fruit and veg to all those businesses. And the city, as a result, is so quiet that you can hear a busker playing a quiet tune across the other side of the square.
Wow. And Jane?
I've probably got two places. So one is Japan, where I spent a little bit of time, and I was just really impressed with the way people can cycle there whilst holding an umbrella very, very effectively. So that was pretty eye-opening. I think the other place actually is Sydney. When I was thinking about this, I thought, well, Sydney ferries for one, it's a pretty great way to commute if you have that option, but also the fact that you can buy a beer on the ferry on your commute home is, something that I'd never seen before. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool.
Thank you. I've got 2 as well. My 2 was just the behaviour of motorists in part of Honolulu. When I was there, I just approached the curb and all the cars stopped, and then I realised, oh, they're waiting for me to cross the road, and there was no pedestrian crossing. They were just being super polite, which was bizarre for me. And the other one was I did a regional train trip into Toronto, and I thought, okay, I'm going to have to try and find where the metro is when the train pulled in. Right, it's going to be difficult to find where the metro is, but it was just straight across the platform, straight onto the metro, straight into the city. So I thought that transfer was really, really simple. And just as an aside, during the planning of the light rail and the terminus at Kingsford, there was a time when the construction company said, oh, it'd be easier if we did it so that the passengers had to walk all the way to the end of the platform and didn't just have the easy interchange they have at the moment. And the council said, no, we want you to have that easy interchange. And as a result, they had to change their design. So that was an outcome that resulted from me experiencing this different transport approach. With regard to theme 1, which is sustainable transport, I just wanted to let the audience know that in our integrated transport strategy, we've mentioned that council will continue to work with Transport for New South Wales to improve public transport. Now, with the latest advice and information about changes they're proposing in the bus system, I just want to let you know that we've reviewed the proposed changes to the South East Sydney bus network, and a report on that matter will be considered by the council at next Tuesday's council meeting. Fiona, we're about to commence work on the rollout of the Kingsford to Centennial Park walking and cycling project. It's due to start in October this year. This will be our first lengthy, fully separated cycleway. At the City of Sydney, you've been involved in a number of similar projects. What have been some of the main concerns raised by residents in the City of Sydney, and how have these concerns been addressed?
Yeah, sure. You always hear so many concerns when you mention a cycleway. I guess the really big first one for the City of Sydney was Burke Street Cycleway in Surrey Hills, or going all the way actually from Redfern up to Woolloomooloo. And the main concerns there were trees, loss of trees, and loss of parking. And there were some residents who letterboxed every house on every nearby street, saying that all the trees along Burke Street would be entirely wiped out. So there was a lot of difficulty for us to try and get the correct information out there. So, there was a lot of negative feedback. And for me, what was such a big surprise, we had so many negative letters. I thought, everyone's against this project. And I went and with the rest of the team door knocked the street to try and sort of like salvage the project. And I was amazed that almost every door I knocked on, people either were, ambivalent about the project or supportive, but we didn't hear from those people. So I guess one of the things is what you hear isn't always what the majority think. But in terms of the trees, there were a few trees that were leaning sideways over the cycleway that presented a hazard. People could hit their heads on the trees. Yep. And so we had originally planned to replace those trees, but hearing what the community said, what we did in those places was extended the footpath out and lost maybe an extra parking spot so that we could bend the cycleway around the tree and keep the tree. And yeah. So, it was basically a process of going through the concerns that were raised, and wherever we could tweak the design to meet the comments that people were giving, we did that. And, the end result, anyone can see today, the cycleway in Burke Street or any of the others, you look at it and you go, how can you imagine the street without that? It's such a useful and beautiful and functional thing. And today, no one would change Burke Street back. Everyone loves it, even people who don't ride a bike. I remember seeing a letter to the Lord Mayor saying, I don't ride a bike and I'm never going to ride a bike. But I must say that when I walk down Burke Street now, it's such a friendlier street. So I think it's brought about a lot of positive changes. It's reduced the crashes, not only crashes involving bikes, but it's even reduced crashes involving pedestrians and crashes between cars. So everyone is safer. The street is more pleasant and quiet. Everyone's won in the end.
I remember Burke Street used to be my commute to when I worked on the north side, and that used to be my commute along there, and it was quite the rat run, quite the strong arterial road. Can you just touch upon what your learnings were during construction?
Yeah, the construction of Burke Street was really involved because we'd taken the approach of trying to do everything with the one project, improve the footpath as well, may as well improve the underground services while we're there so it doesn't need to get dug up. So as a result of it was very intense and did go on for a long time. The important thing really was that the construction company had a liaison person who went and visited the businesses that were impacted in the stretch where the construction was happening every day. And they'd go and say, today we're going to do the construction from this time to this time. You know, we've scheduled it around your, you know, breakfast time when you're a cafe or your evening time, and tried to sort of work around the times that are most important to you, where, you know, this is what we're doing today, this is what we're doing next week, we should be out by this time. So it was, the key really was a lot of communication with the people who were affected to make sure they understood.
And can you just touch upon how the community feels about the cycleway now? You mentioned it quickly then, but what's their perception of it, and what are you getting feedback from other streets?
Yeah, I mean, when we've then gone to build other cycleways, and, you know, I've spoken to residents who've said, oh, I don't want to cycle on my street. And you say, well, it's going to be like Burke Street. I say, oh, like Burke Street. And then, you know, because they can see the benefits when there's an example there for them to see. Okay,
thank you. With regard to the pandemic at the moment, what kind of growth have you seen in the city in the last decade, but also at the height of the pandemic? How's that have changed the way people have moved around with regard to bicycles?
Yeah, over the last 10 years, we've seen a doubling of bike trips in the City of Sydney Council area. And the growth is always steepest when we put in new infrastructure, especially where that then forms a crucial connection to something else. With the pandemic, there was an overall drop in movement. So people staying at home, people working from home. So the movement across Sydney went down. The last time I looked was down, was about 50% of normal travel levels. And yet the numbers on our cycleways were about level with where they usually would be, and some were higher. So we can see that the cycling has been really resilient, a really resilient form of transport. It's great. You don't need to wear a mask on your bike. You always get a seat. You don't have to get too close to anyone.
Yeah, thank you. Also, during the pandemic, we saw a number of pop-up temporary cycleways being installed quickly in the City of Sydney, and also we installed one along High Street in Randwick. What do you think of this temporary approach? What's the benefits of it? And is this a way of the future to test out traffic changes or pedestrian changes for people riding bikes?
Yeah, I think it's got pros and cons. And for us, one thing that we really missed was the time we normally spent really thoroughly consulting with the community, having a chance to hear all their issues, explain the answers, or, you know, tweak the design and make sure people were comfortable with that. So we really missed that. And we know that for some people in the community, it was a real shock to wake up and have, you know, a pop-up cycleway down the street or across the road. Yeah. And so, you know, that was a bit difficult. And I think, you know, trust has frayed a little bit with that. But the upside was that we had a life-size model to actually facilitate the conversations. And, you know, where people were afraid, oh, we're going to lose parking on Henderson Road, people thought that all the parking on the northern side was going to go. But once we actually built it and showed them there's room for parking on both sides of the road still, you know, it made those conversations much easier in the end. Yeah. So yeah, having that life-size model, being able to show people that their concerns about being able to get into and out of the driveway, or, you know, whatever, that it's actually works fine is really great.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Fiona. Jane, within the strategy, we've stated that our list of priority bike routes will be updated soon. Can you tell us about the plans for this?
I can. I also just wanted to say, just as a former resident of Henderson Road, actually, yeah, it was the transformation with the pop-up cycleway was really amazing. And yeah, I would never have been able to visualize how that could work. But yeah, when you sort of have life-size model, like you say, Fiona, yeah, it makes a really big impact. So, yeah, so we have a set of priority bike routes that we've listed for construction to sort of put our focus on constructing over the next few years. The last time we did that was in 2015. So council went out to the community and got a lot of feedback, and we were able to sort of highlight 11 different routes that we want to focus on over the next few years. So we've been working away on those, and now it's time for us to sort of update those and see how the community's feeling and what sort of origins and destinations we need to focus on. Yeah. So our plan at the moment is to go out to the community for consultation probably in October this year, yep. Get some feedback and then revise those routes and start planning for the next phase.
Thank you. Before I go into the next theme, I noticed that Nicole on Facebook is asking about Transport for New South Wales bus changes, and she has asked, can you outline what revised changes to the bus network will be? Are those different to the ones being consulted on? We have as much information as the community does. On their website, they have a whole lot of links. You have to find, it's a little bit difficult to find the exact link for the exact bus route that you're talking about. But if you keep looking through toward the end of some of the pages on those links, you might find the exact route that you're talking about. As I said, we've got a report going up to the council. It's available on our website now. So if you look at the council, Randwick Council, look at the business papers, and you'll see the agenda for next Tuesday night's council meeting. And in there, we've got we approach the routes that we think need better clarification, where we think the community has lost out, and we've identified that. And our recommendation is that we go to the Transport for New South Wales and express strong concerns about that. There is a whole lot of information on the website, and I think people, when they've heard feedback about particular routes, just go and check the Transport for New South Wales website, and that will explain to you what may or may not be happening with your particular route. I'll just check any more questions. Nope, thank you. So moving on to theme 2, electric vehicles and electrification of transport. We've got our expert here, Peter. But before I do that, I'll ask all of us in the group, do any of us have any an electric vehicle or an e-bike? Are you considering buying one? And what do you think there are the barriers for you or others about adopting electric vehicles or e-bikes? We'll start with Jane.
I don't currently have an EV or an e-bike. We do have some e-bikes at council, which is good. So yeah, they're the ones that I've spent the most time on. I'm holding off buying one until I physically need one. So for now, I'm just going with a regular push bike.
Thank you. Peter.
I wish I was the expert in something, Tony, but thank you. I also have access to the fleet of e-bikes the council has and a couple of the electric vehicles. I'd love to buy an electric vehicle, and at some stage in the future, maybe I can. But at the moment, it's really, I guess what we found with the electric vehicles, even for the severe petrol heads, is that once they get into an electric vehicle, they realise that they're exactly the same as an internal combustion engine, and they're very comfortable very quickly. Yeah. And, you know, if you feel the same way, except being an environmentalist, you know, I guess I'm pleased that it's got less environmental impact. You can still sit in the traffic jam, but it's less environmental impact, and you feel, you know, like you're doing the right thing for the future. But the anxiety that every EV person brings up, and we've had this in surveys, is the charging network. And I think that, you know, it's that kind of issue. We're working to resolve that, and we'll discuss that shortly. But it's really to know that, you know, we got so comfortable with being able to pull into a petrol station and put petrol in an internal combustion engine, that there's this urban myth that people still feel uncomfortable about whether they can charge without the battery running out. As far as the e-bikes, again, I'm a dinosaur. I use the old traditional treadly. And the concern I have when I'm using the e-bike for council here's the speed it can get to in that pedal assist, which is great going up hills because Randwick's so diverse with the hilly areas and the flatter areas. But yeah, my concern is kind of what speed you can get to, and when you consider going onto the footpath because of the network not being quite right, you feel sort of guilty that you're taking the e-bike onto the footpath when I know you shouldn't.
Yes, unless you're accompanying your children, which I'm sure you always do.
That's right, always got a child on the back of one.
Fiona, your experience.
Yeah, I've had an EV for the last 5 or 6 years. My EV comes with special powers. I get to park right at the front door of the supermarket and load my groceries in. I get to use all the bike paths and shortcuts through the developments and so on. It's a cargo bike and it's just fantastic for all my transport needs. I highly recommend it. I don't have range anxiety. It lasts me a couple of days of getting around, but I could always take the battery off the bike and put it up on my desk and charge it there, or take a charger with me, stop at a cafe and, you know, have a nice meal while I charge my battery if I need to.
Fiona, for those who don't know, could you explain what a cargo bike is?
Yeah, it's designed for carrying cargo or children. So the one I've got has a large bucket at the front, effectively, or box with, it has a child seat, a seat for 2 children with little seat belts. It's designed for carrying kids. My kids are all grown up, but my dogs love it. And it's really handy for the shopping. And actually, my manager really likes being taken to meetings across town in the front because he feels really special, and he gives the royal wave to everyone.
I think I might have to tell my team about that. Just a feedback from Anne on Facebook or in the chat. She said she would love an electric car, but has nowhere to charge it in her apartment block. And that's a real issue. And that's where, and one of our strategic approaches, 1.17 in our strategy, says that council will require the provision of electric vehicle and electric bicycle charging stations in new residential and commercial buildings. I know that doesn't help you out at the moment, Anne, and we're investigating the feasibility of providing subsidies to encourage installation of charging stations in existing residential and commercial buildings. So that's one of our objectives, Anne. So by all means, get in touch with us and let us know, and we might even use your premises as the pilot location. Just coming back to another question that's come in. Raha on Facebook is asking about easier public transport access from Waterloo to Randwick. And she states, from Waterloo, people have to walk 20 minutes to get to the bus stop and get to Randwick. Really, really important feedback. And I really hope that you put those details into the current community consultation that Transport for New South Wales is doing, so that they understand your particular issues. We've spoken to some of the senior people in Transport for New South Wales. They are listening. One of the points that they've really recognised is there's limited access from Randwick to the St Vincent's Hospital area. And I think they've heard that loud and clear. So Raha, you've got your particular issues. Please let it be known. For all we know, there's 20 or 30 other people out there who've got similar issues. And the more that people give this feedback to Transport, the more they can tweak their bus services. Thank you for that. I also have another question. Simon has referred to item 1.18 of the strategy, which reads, provide 5 new publicly accessible electric vehicle charging stations per year until 2031. Is that number a typo, or is that really the extent of council's ambition, especially as Peter says, access to charging is the #1 barrier? How does that correspond to the stated aim to be the Norway of EVs in Australia? I guess what we're talking about there, Simon, is these charging places. So with our proposal, we'll have 50 in by the 53 or whatever it is, at least by 2031. What we're saying there is these are for people who are visiting locations. It's not they're not so much for people who live in a location to park their vehicle there every night to get charged. These are more about people who might be running low. They've come from wherever, Parramatta, or you've just been using your EV all week and it's running low, so you can prop into Coogee or Kingsford or La Perouse, wherever we put these, and you can top up your battery. So it's not about a long-term, we only want to serve 50 people. It's about something ancillary to what your normal charging location will be. Most people who buy an EV generally have an off-street parking space that they put a charger with. Other people are using their workplace if they're lucky enough to do that. So that's what we intend on that. I don't know, Peter, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I did. I think the strategy timing is quite useful and good, because in response to the first resident's question there, council presently runs a rebate program for about 10 household energy saving, renewable and water saving items. And as of July 1, and I hope you don't mind me hearing it live on Facebook, the council will be providing rebates for householders in units and homes to install electric vehicle chargers for their purpose. The rebates won't necessarily meet the costs, but what they are there to do is to try and encourage, facilitate, incentivise people in units or people in houses to be able to put their own chargers in, complying with all the regulatory requirements, and also start to get over that anxiety that you have. And, you know, I'll come to the other bit about the EV charging station network later on. If that's
okay. So Raha and people like her, I believe it's female, I don't know, I might be wrong there.
Yeah.
For Raha, how would they apply to for that rebate?
Well, as I said, it's going to come in with the next tranche of additional rebates.
Thank you.
So it's not available yet. All I can suggest is if you go to the council webpage, for the sustainability rebates are on offer at the moment for energy and water saving items, and shortly around that start of the financial year, you'll find the information relevant to the opportunity people have for getting a rebate on installing chargers in their home or unit.
Thanks, Peter. Tim has asked, is council considering segregated cycleways to reduce the risk of getting doored? For those who have not heard that term before, doored is when riding along next to a car and the door opens up, and it's quite a high risk incident, and it can result in either being injured on the door or you bounce off and you fall in front of approaching traffic or traffic approaching from behind. The Doncaster Avenue is a particularly risky one to ride within the cycle lane itself. Considering there is a school on this road, would it be worth revising this one? Tim, exactly right. And that's what we were saying to Fiona earlier on. We're about to start construction of a cycleway along Doncaster Avenue, through Day Avenue down to Houston Road, and then down to Sturt Street through part of Bayside Council. We recognise that it's a really popular route. It's one of our most heavily used routes. Hundreds of people use it per day, and construction is likely to commence October this year on just that, a separated cycleway along Doncaster Avenue. The build time will take quite a while, but we certainly are working on it. Thanks for that question, Tim. Brenda on Facebook is asking, do those using e-bikes need to register the bike to pay for the road? No, bikes don't have to pay for the road. They're paid by other taxes, fuel taxes, and in the future, EV taxes, as we've heard over the last couple of days. Eric on Facebook is asking, can we fast track the metro plans to Maroubra Junction? This would help residents travel to and from the city whilst help planning the bicycle lane. I'll just show you a document that you can all look at. I'm not sure whether you'll be able to see that here, but if you Google or whatever search engine you use, the Southeast Sydney Transport Strategy. So this is a state government strategy, Southeast Sydney Transport Strategy, and that talks about the ideas about metro. They're not solidified yet. They've got a fuzzy line saying where they think it will go. And the early route is down to Malabar and further. And then they've got subsequent routes heading out to Cogra. These are multi-billion-dollar projects. These will take some time, but if you're interested in it and you want to know some of the details about it, as you understand, Randwick Council is a council. We don't provide public transport, but we can certainly ask a lot of questions about it and lobby for changes. But if you want more information, Southeast Sydney Transport Strategies, where to go. Coming back to Peter, Why should a place like Randwick support electric vehicles?
Thanks, Tony. The reality about climate change and greenhouse effect is that the fastest or the most rapidly increasing greenhouse gases comes from transport. We seem to have a lot of the stationary emissions under control through solar. People may not realise how quickly Australia's gone to the highest or the fastest country in the world in installing rooftop solar. And as we get a better handle on the emissions from power stations that are giving us our electricity, the focus really is on transport emissions. And the transport emissions are increasing by or around 20% or just under 20% of greenhouse gas emissions, and they're still the fastest growing ones. So the reality is that we have to look at solutions to transport that can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and everywhere in the world is probably at a better pace than we are in Australia. The manufacturers themselves, I think almost every manufacturer in the world now has a timeline for when they're going to produce electric versions of the current models, and the countries themselves now have phase-out dates for when internal combustion engines will no longer be permitted to be sold in their countries. Yeah. So, you know, the industry's moving there, the countries are seeing the writing on the wall. It's all because of the response to climate change that's becoming quite critical around transport. And there's this move to try and find the electric vehicles that will decrease the emissions that we get at the moment contributing to the climate change.
Right, thank you. And in terms of supporting the adoption of EVs, can you tell us what's happening overseas and what cities or councils in Australia do you think are doing this well, and how do we compare?
Look, I'll just go straight to the end point there. I think Randwick is in the leading group as far as providing EV charging infrastructure, because we did a survey 5 years ago now that started a 2-year process where a collaboration with Waverley and Wallara councils was going out to the community and saying, look, what are your obstacles to considering electric vehicles? And that survey established what Survey Sense had done, and that is the anxiety around being able to charge your electric car when and if you choose or can purchase an electric vehicle. So we started this 2-year process, and Randwick, Waverley and Wallara's project led the way for local councils in the Sydney metro area to establish what's become the largest public electric vehicle charging infrastructure network of any local council in Sydney.
Wow.
And it took 2 years to get there. I think the last of those EV charging stations across the eastern suburbs is only still being completed because there's a lot of challenges in the wiring, the location, and sort of placing it in a way that's available to the wider number of the community. But because we started this process before it was trendy, and we were trying to respond as a eastern suburbs collaboration of local councils, we've installed public EV stations in each of our areas. Fortunately, Randwick's invested and increased the number of public EV stations available for residents and visitors to 6. We funded a local school, and they put in their own 2 public EV charging stations at the spot. And we've also got additional EV stations at council sites, and between the 3 councils, we're looking at the next range of charging stations we can put in. But it is, it's at the forefront of everyone's thinking. You've got ARENA funding it at the Commonwealth level. You've got the electric utilities looking at different solutions. You've got partnerships and collaborations with a lot of, companies that are trying to find which version of public EV charging stations they can put in. And you've got ideas now where they'll be installed on lampposts, around the electricity substations, in the flats and units. So, we're at the very start of a process. And I'd like to think that number you raised that we need to install by 2031 will actually be, overwhelmed by all these others and their moves to install public EV stations, as well as developers and people in existing unit blocks, especially the larger size ones, putting in EV charging stations that will accommodate what's going to happen naturally, but it would happen faster or more accelerated if we had greater support of the various government levels.
So that should give Simon some reassurance.
And there's a good website as well, isn't there, Peter? Plugshare.com, where people can go and have a look and sort of see where your local EV charging station is.
Yeah, plugshare.com. The last couple of days, Peter, there's been an announcement from the state government to encourage the purchase of electric vehicles. Do you have a sense of how this might impact residents in Randwick?
Yeah, well, I think each of the state governments has been trying to grapple in the vacuum of leadership at the Commonwealth level, if you don't mind me saying that, and they've all been making different moves to try and, again, accelerate that transition to electric vehicles. Unfortunately, Victoria's got it wrong, and according to what the commentators are saying, is New South Wales appears to have it right. And the scope of New South Wales government's net zero emission strategy, which brings in electric vehicles now in a more, if you like, comprehensive way, will provide rebates, reasonably, extravagant rebates for a limited number of electric vehicles. They'll be exempt some of the normal stamp duty conditions, and they're really trying to speed up how quickly the market will put electric vehicles on the road. And they're also talking about electrifying the state government fleet because they understand that, people will buy cars and they'll be selling them. But if state government and other levels of government are purchasing cars and sell those secondhand in a number of years, as they do with the normal turnover of vehicles, that'll create an additional secondhand market for these vehicles as well.
Yeah.
So it's really a strong move to try and send the right signals, not only to the community, but to the manufacturers and to those companies that are trying to bring electric vehicle cars into the market in Australia.
Thanks for that, Peter. We'll move on now to theme 3, a safe and balanced road network. And I've got a question here from Josh from Little Bay. He's asked, what is Council currently doing towards improving road safety? I just want to let the community know that we're rolling out new improved facilities for pedestrians currently. We've been lucky enough to secure some funding from the federal government. We have just recently introduced a number of pedestrian refuges. We've got more to come through, and we're about to improve the safety of a number of our pedestrian crossings by raising them onto a raised platform, which really adds a lot of safety for the pedestrians because they are more conspicuous to the approaching motorists. The crossing itself is more conspicuous, and the motorists, as they traverse the crossing or as they're approaching it, are operating at a much slower speed. So thanks for that question, Josh. Also, what we're doing is we're looking at whether there's locations where 40 km/h speed limits could be installed. We're about to update the Kensington West Kingsford local area traffic management scheme. We're hopeful that we'll have that finalised or out for consultation towards October, November this year. So those who are living in that area, please keep an eye out for our consultation. Get in touch with our normal social connections and we'll keep you informed. On another matter, Jane, the strategy mentions a transport mode hierarchy. What exactly does this mean and what's the benefit?
So when we talk about a transport mode hierarchy, I guess if you think about different transport modes, what we mean is, walking, cycling, different types of public transport, private vehicles, delivery vehicles. So we're sort of considering all of these different users of the road network and the broader sort of street network. So the idea behind developing a hierarchy is for council to adopt a position to say, these are the road users that we think need to be prioritised. So in many examples in different councils and in different cities, it's sort of pedestrians first. So we sort of plan for pedestrians first and make sure that there are safe crossings, safe connections, all of those kinds of things. So having that hierarchy for us will just help us when we come to do a local area traffic management plan, or are we looking at a local centre and making some changes? It will sort of guide how we plan those changes to make sure that we're considering, you know, the right users first, I guess, and then sort of trickling changes down and across the whole street.
Okay, thank you for that. If you're listening, if you've got any other questions, please make sure you type them in and get them to us. Before I ask the next question, I just thought I'd ask you to do that. So please, if you've got any questions, ask them now. That's what we're here for. A question to all of the panellists. How do you think Randwick can work towards a safer and more balanced road network? Peter?
Stop people using the roads. Get them out of the cars, get them walking, get them cycling, have the viable alternative being supported and provided with the infrastructure that council provides in the city.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's about giving them an alternative, about giving them options. It's not about saying you must never use your car, must always use your bike or anything like that. It's about making an alternative network that works for them. It's safe, convenient, so they can choose, oh, today it's a fine day, I don't have the kids, or I'm not doing a massive shop, I'm just going to get a few things, I can take my bike. So thank you for that. Jane?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's also, you know, we also need to consider land use and transport planning at the same time. So when we're sort of thinking about, you know, developments that are coming or looking at a local centre and how can we sort of redevelop and modernise local centres and things like that, it's to consider transport at that stage as well, and how we want people to move around. Do we want this location to be, you know, a traffic thoroughfare and a through route, or do we actually want to sort of bring in a more a place-based transport planning approach to it and make it a place where, you know, we activate it. We want people to stay there, and we want people to be able to ride a bike there or to walk there with their kids. So I think it's, yeah, making sure that's integrated.
Fiona, do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I think if you look at the Transport for New South Wales customer research, they found that it was 70% of Sydney-siders want to ride or ride more if it was safe, as in they were separated from traffic. And if you take that fact and say, well, a lot of people want to do it, but are currently not doing it. And if you also look at the school holiday effect, during school holidays, when only 5 to 10% of people drive, or 5 to 10% less people are driving, then the roads flow smoothly. So we could get school holiday effect every day of the year if we make it safe enough for even a quarter or a fifth of those people who want to ride to be able to do so. So really, it really is everyone benefits if we can just facilitate that choice for people.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yvonne on Facebook says, thanks, Peter, great answer about providing supportive options and alternatives for everyone's situation. Appreciate that feedback, Yvonne. I have no further questions. Does anybody in the panel wish to say anything else before we wrap up? Silence?
No, I'll offer an invitation. You know, the informing strategies are described as live documents or live strategies, and they're going to be reviewed, you know, annually. It's not as though you've got a document that's going to sit around for 5 years before someone gets back to it. And I think the invitation for the environment strategy, the transport strategy, the other informing strategies we've got is to keep council accountable. You know, keep coming back and challenging us. You know, if we finish something, or if we say we finished it, let's prove it. And if we finished it, what are we going to replace it with? And, you know, if we're making statements about, you know, 5 EV charging stations, as much as I worry about the budget for that, you know, I think that that's what we should be working to and held accountable for.
Yep.
And that because they're live strategies, we should be encouraging people to keep coming back and feeding back new ideas. Technologies change, you know, approaches change, and just try and keep us on our toes so that we can lead by example as far as doing what we're saying we want to do here.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Peter. That's good for everyone to hear about that. A couple of questions have come in. Tim has asked, any chance of making the placemaking initiative on Coogee Bay Road a permanent one? It was great. And also, are there any plans to implement similar initiatives in other suburbs? Yes, there were quite strong views about the Coogee Bay Road approach. That was a temporary measure. We put that in. It was relatively low cost for what it was, but as a result, it was high maintenance on it. So, as I understand it, council is considering that. It was put in as a temporary measure, and the future of Coogee Bay Road is still up for discussion, and will be out to the community later. There was a lot of support for it, so council certainly recognises that, and will be out talking to the community in coming times. Christine says, consideration hasn't been given for the elderly who are unable to ride a bike. I understand that concern. So one of the issues that is across my desk quite often these days is about delivery riders riding on footpaths, causing concerns for pedestrians, particularly frail pedestrians. And that's an issue that we need to address. We're looking at providing more parking for delivery riders on the roadway to encourage them to do that. It does need some enforcement. It does need some ranger enforcement and police enforcement. So that's something that we are working on. So thanks for that feedback, Christine. Kevin says, I am a cyclist. My car is a Kia Picanto, one of the smallest cars on the road. I acknowledge your efforts on more bike lanes, safer roads, etc. But the federal government has a policy of massive tax relief for people buying very large utes, which are not friendly to cyclists or pedestrians. What can an LGA do against policies like this? It is a big issue. We are only one of many councils. The tax incentives, there's all sorts of levers and buttons that are pulled and pushed with regard to those tax incentives. I don't know whether you know anything about this, Peter?
I wish it was as easy as it should be for a whole range of issues. You know, Commonwealth, state and local government have got different responsibilities, and it's just not an easy one that we can tackle, but we can still be the voice amongst all the other voices that are trying to agitate and have things changed. Yeah, it is a bit difficult. We can but wave the flag. Do you have any comments, Fiona?
Yeah, I agree. It's a perverse incentive, and maybe it's something that people can write to their local federal member about.
Yeah. All right. One more question coming through. I've been informed. So for all those participating, I'd like to thank you for coming along. Hopefully it was informative. We didn't want to go through the document clause by clause. We thought we'd just have a chat and just get some ideas out there. If you have any questions, by all means, write to council@randwick.nsw.gov.au, and we're happy to take those questions up later. Dean from Clovelly says, I may have missed the discussion during the discussion about electric vehicles, but when will you introduce EV buses? As I mentioned before, the council doesn't operate the public transport system, but there has been recent announcements by the Minister for Transport that they are moving towards electric buses soon. I don't know if any of the panel members know the dates on that.
No.
No, I sensed it was about a year or two, so it's coming. So thanks for that, Dean. One last comment from a viewer. A low-cost idea of share bikes implemented by council to coincide with cycle lanes. Each household can register or perhaps give out certain amounts of free use before charges are made per use or time of use. Also can be enforced should bikes be damaged. So I think you're talking about electric bicycles there, do you think, Amanda? I don't know, I was in China a few years ago and many of the shops just have cords trailing out and you just step over them because they provide that service for their customers across the footpath. But yeah, that's something that could be looked at. We'd have to be careful about the cables and the electricity, and there are some issues about that. But certainly, it's one we could certainly look at. I hear there's no more questions. Okay, next steps. So as I said, our integrated transport informing strategy is out for community consultation at the moment. We want your feedback. We think we've got it fairly right, but unless we get the feedback from the community, we don't really know that. So it's important for you to give us your feedback. Please do that. If you go to the website, which is just use your search engine, search for Your Say Randwick, and then you'll find the current 3 informing strategies that are out for consultation. Consultation closes, submissions will be received up to the 28th of June, so you've got a little bit of time. Please read them. As I said, they're fairly lightweight documents. They're not the big hefty documents of the past. There is a transport strategy, a transport study in there. That's got a lot of detail in it. So if you really want to dig down into what the community thinks, what the details are behind the strategy, you can certainly do that. But by all means, we'd really like to hear from you. We'd really like to get your feedback, and please contact us or give us feedback via Your Say Randwick. That's us for now. Thank you, Fiona, for participating. Appreciate you giving us your time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Peter. And to all those listening, thank you very much for listening to us and observing us. And I wish you a good evening. Good night.